Back in the day, no one had really heard of Bram Stoker until Dracula was published in 1897. He's known really as a journalist and mostly as the theatre manager of the Lyceum, whose star actor is his friend Henry Irving. Henry Irving is the biggest acting star of his day. He hires Stoker in 1878. They first meet in 1876 in Dublin, and Stoker claims, in a marvellous book called Reminiscences of Henry Irving, that Irving gave a performance that was so gripping, so terrifying, of the reading of a poem called The Dream of Eugene Aram, that he was completely mesmerised by him, and at the end collapsed in a fit of hysterics, almost fainting. He said it was so gripping. He said he'd never seen art brought to such a height by an actor. And so in 1878, when Irving takes the lease of the Lyceum, he sends for Stoker from Dublin, and Stoker comes from Dublin, and they begin this extraordinary partnership of the mercurial genius and his faithful friend. And when one considers that within a few years they're also working with Arthur Conan Doyle, you start to wonder if Holmes and Watson have some kind of visual connection. Also, the fact that because Doyle grew up in Edinburgh, Irving was better known there than in London for a long time, until the 1870s. So Stoker and Irving had this extraordinary friendship, where Irving is the star and Stoker is his faithful friend. Stoker writes, he publishes stories, but he's never particularly famous during that period. Irving is a huge star and uses Stoker's writing talent to write speeches and to give addresses to the Oxford Union, for example. He passes those speeches off as his own. But Stoker is the faithful writer. Always in the play, the first thing we hear is him typing. Before we see him, we hear him typing, because that's his job. He's faithful. He's marketing. He's accountant. He's everything, and serves Irving. And yet you feel within the Reminiscences that there's this pressure always of wanting to write, and there's obviously this huge, great novel growing within him that's going to arrive on the scene in 1897 and reverse their situations, or start to. As Stoker, the servant, is going to become the star. Although it's interesting that he never leaves Irving, even when he's a literary star, he never leaves him. So there's a kind of emotional and imaginative dependency between the two of them, which leads us to the extraordinary question, is Henry Irving the model for Dracula? Well, that's quite possible, because he's very gentlemanly. When Dracula is first appeared, he's an extraordinary gentleman, very chivalrous, wears black, greets Jonathan Harker, his potential victim. He's extraordinarily chivalrous, which Irving was. And yet, if it was Irving, if Irving's the model for Dracula, Dracula is vampiric. And was subconsciously Bram writing about their relationship, about his desire creatively to break free, and the fact that he had no time to write the things he wanted to write? There's a particularly moving and terrible story, if it's true from one tradition connected to the Stoker family, that Bram attempted a reading of Dracula, and it's possible that he may have first conceived of Dracula as a stage play. Certainly some of the characters, certainly Dracula, the revealed Dracula, the monstrous Dracula, is quite similar to a couple of characters in the Irving repertoire, and as is the gentlemanly, courteous Irving. So it's possible that Irving and Dracula are connected, and in this reading there's an attempt to copyright Dracula, which needs to give it a public reading where people hear it and can say that this is the work of Bram Stoker. And the story goes that the reading began, Irving walked out, left the doors swinging, and was heard to say in the corridor, "Dreadful, it's dreadful." This to the man who served him faithfully for 20 years, and who was a devotee, who'd been mesmerised by him. What did that do to that relationship? You know, I don't know, and I've imagined what it might have done.